Well, there was a time change that happened last night, but let me tell you something. If you have little kids or brand newborn babies, nobody gives a rip about time change. Time change is irrelevant. So, good morning. Good to see you. My name is Mingo. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're going to go through this book of Esther. If you spent any time in or at church, sometimes we will go through a series of conversations that are around a particular topic, and then sometimes we'll shift gears, and then we'll dive in through like a all-together chunk of the Bible, and then sometimes we get really crazy and we just dive into a whole book. And the Book of Esther is going to be the space that we're going to be hanging out in for the next couple of weeks. But there's a theme around the Book of Esther. If you don't know, or you're unfamiliar with the Bible, Esther is one of the books in the Old Testament, and it depicts the story of a family, but it's around a central figure, a central character, a woman named Esther, and it displays God's goodness. But through the storyline, it reminds us, it kind of brings us all back to this big question. The question is like, are you there, God? Are you there? I'm wondering if the things that I'm going through and the circumstances that I find myself in, I'm curious to know, God, if you are present, if you care, if you are interested in what's happening in my life. And the best way I can describe it is the way that I felt my son's same question. I was camping this weekend with a couple of the dads from church, Dez isn't a dad, but Dez was there. Basically, we're like a father to Dez. Dez was there, Zane, John, and a couple of other dads from church. And this was the first time I took Nico camping. So it was like a dice roll. Nico's 5 years old, and you don't know if your 5-year-old's going to be into camping or not. So big time adventure, not really sure. Went out to Anza Borrego, and we're out in the desert there. And Nico, the first night, I made his bed. I won't tell you that I forgot like almost everything on this camping trip, but I basically forgot the like sleeping bag. And instead I packed our guest linens bag, which is just white sheets and duvet covers. So I was tucking Nico in, and in the middle of the night, I woke up wondering if he was warm enough, and I just see Nico like, almost like a psychopath looking at me like he's going to murder me, but like eyes nearly like splitting my pillow with me, and I can only imagine in his mind in sheer darkness if he's wondering like, did you just bring me out here to leave me? Or like, are you still there, Dad? Like that's the question that Nico was asking. And I woke up probably 4 or 5 times through the night, and every time I woke up, Nico was already up looking at me. And I loved, like, he loved it. I'll show you a picture, but like he's just red cheeks, just super engaged in it. And all night long that night, I was thinking about this morning how it parallels this idea. As a kiddo, Nico wants to know, in a new space, in unknown territory, in an environment that he's never been in, am I with him all through it? This is the exact same question that's going to be addressed in this. The story of Esther is going to beg the question, God, are you here through all this adversity? Are you here through these crazy storyline, like highs and lows? And my hope as we go through the book of Esther is that you're going to not just maybe discover for the first time an incredible story. Honestly, the book of Esther, top 5 crazy stories in the Bible, should be a movie, in my opinion. But in these rich characters and these crazy circumstances that you hear of, what's interesting about the book of Esther is that it never mentions God. It's not a book where God is a central figure. Instead, the author, as he writes or she writes, we don't know because the author is unknown. The author builds this whole narrative around this central figure, and you see the underpinnings of God at work. You sense the fingerprints and the grace and the goodness and the provision of God, but they won't ever mention God. It's actually a literary technique. They're gonna undermine God's mentioning in the beginning of this book, and at the end you're going to hear everybody essentially give praise to to God for his protection and for his provision and for his presence. So here's what I want to do. I want to actually give you like a breakdown of this book. It's 10 chapters long, and I'm going to give you kind of a survey of the first, like half of the book. I want to introduce you to the characters. I want to get you familiar with some of the plot that is through this book of Esther. But if you've never read it, here's my encouragement to you. It's an easy story. It reads like a story. So if you've like maybe never been somebody who's like read along for like what's happening on Sundays on the weekends, this might be a really great way to like dive in, especially if you've never kind of gone into the Old Testament. This is kind of a jam you can get into. These are like the best, these are the oldies, the good stuff in the Old Testament. And it's an easy read. So let me tell you the characters of the story of Esther. You'll start by getting to introduced to this Persian king. His name is Xerxes. Xerxes is the very beginning. He's the character that you meet at the intro of this storyline. And Xerxes is a self-consumed king. He is all about himself in the worst way. He wants people to tell him stories of how good he is. He's a ruthless king. He's ultra vain. He's super violent. And strangely enough, through all the book of Esther, we are told over and over and over again that King Xerxes loves to party. He loves to party so much, in fact, that we are brought in on this storyline where he is throwing a festival. He's throwing a party for himself that lasts 187 days. He's throwing a 187-day party. Like if you thought you partied hard in college, you were nothing against Xerxes, right? He didn't he didn't break for the weekends. He doubled down on the weekends. Monday was not like oh dang, I got to go back to work. He's like, I'm going back to the party. Xerxes throws a 187-day festival and party with the theme of how awesome is Xerxes. That's essentially the theme of his party. Like you probably know people like this in your life. They are all about themselves, but they're not to the degree of how consumed Xerxes. Well, maybe you have some ex-boyfriends that are like that. But Xerxes is a character that you probably would be familiar with. If you guys are familiar with that really sweet Disney film 300, Xerxes is the crazy warrior king that is depicted in the film 300. My dad and I, when we were younger, we used to be like, let's do sit-ups so we can get 300 bodies, until we found out that those were all computer-generated bodies. And then I was like, I'm just going to have more tacos. So Xerxes is the king. If you remember the movie 300, let me tell you, I'm not recommending that film, but in the movie 300, he's bronzed, and he's all big, and he's got rings, and he's all he's weirdly into himself and a bunch of other things. That is based on of this biblical character, Xerxes. And Xerxes throws this 187-day party that is all about how awesome and how powerful and how central to everybody's life he is. The Persian Empire is in charge of this little micro community of now exiled Jews. If you're familiar with the Bible, the Israelites are God's chosen people, but about 100 years before this storyline hits, God's chosen people in their community, they're all displaced. They have been exiled. There's been raids and invasions of other people groups, and this people group under Xerxes, they take over, and a bunch of people scatter. And so there's this small remnant of Israelites, of Jewish people, that are now living inside of Susa, which is the Persian capital. So you hearing me here? There's displaced Jews in Susa, the Persian capital, by which Xerxes is the king. And the king is throwing himself this massive party. And this is where we get introduced to the king's queen, her name is Vashti. At the end of this 187-day party, Xerxes, being so full of himself and probably a little more intoxicated than the rest of the people at the party, calls for his queen because he wants to show off how beautiful his queen is to all the people attending the party. And Vashti gets word of this. She doesn't like it, but in this era, you wouldn't say like, oh, you want me to come downstairs to the party by which you've been raging for 187 days? Yeah, I'm probably just going to watch Netflix upstairs. That's not the way that you would respond as the queen. But Queen Vashti, she rejects the summoning of her to be paraded off as the first biblical trophy wife to all of Xerxes' party friends. And so what she does is she gets tossed out. She gets demoted. She is no longer queen. Xerxes, kind of in a drunken rage, removes her crown, throws her out of the kingdom, and then decides on that very night that he's going to launch like the very first like Persian's top model like search. And he sends out a decree. There's over 100 different provinces in the Persian Empire, and he sends out a decree at the end, the last week of his 187-day party, and he goes, I want all the women, potential women who could be fit to be my new queen, I want them to be like sought after. I'm going to send out like teams of people to interview all the most beautiful women in all the Persian land. And whether or not they are Persian, they're Jewish, they're from another country, it doesn't matter. I'm just looking for my next queen. So they launch the next Persian top model, and for the next several months, they are hunting for what could be the king's replacement queen. And it's sad and it's kind of weird the way that the storyline breaks out, because you don't have a choice on whether or not you get to be a participant in this great model search. It's people coming into your community, and they're basically asking like, who's the most beautiful of you? And they just basically abduct you. They take you, and then you are put up in the king's quarters amongst several hundred, potentially 1,000 other participants in this search for the next queen. And that's when we get introduced to the next character, which is Esther. Esther is a Jewish young woman who is known amongst her community as being, one, an orphan. We don't know, the story doesn't tell us how her parents pass away, but she is under the watchful care of her uncle, a man by the name of Mordecai. So Esther and Mordecai are related, and they are exiled Jews in this Persian Empire. And as the Jews, or as Xerxes' team goes out to go look for the next queen, they find Esther, and Esther is a standout amongst all the rest of the women in her community. And so that crew decides to take Esther. And Mordecai, her uncle, he gives her like a fair share warning, because they're exiles in this Persian Empire. He says, hide your identity, hide your origins. Don't let anybody know that you're a Jew, because we're in unfriendly territory. So yes, you're going to go and you're going to have to be potentially judged to whether or not you might be the queen of the next queen of Persia. But here's what I'm telling you as your loving uncle: do not tell them your origins, because it will not fare well for you. And Mordecai, over and over in this story, is a loving relative who's checking on the well-being of his niece, Esther. So Esther gets swept into this massive hall of several thousand women, and the process for how they're going to determine the next queen is crazy. They have to go through what is like 1 year's worth of preparation. If you read the story, it's like they go through like 6 months worth of like beauty treatments. where they're like, I don't know what the heck they're doing, but it's like you get your hair and nails done for a whole year. It's like six months of that, and then they go through like a perfuming process, like an aromatherapy. You get like essential oiled for 6 months. It's just like all up in you, and that's before you get introduced to the roster of people that will eventually introduce you to the king. And in this whole scenario, it would be fair to ask the question, in Esther's and Mordecai's beginning of the introduction of this story, they would probably be wondering and asking the question, God, is this really your plan? Like we've been exiled from our community. We don't have our own home. We're living as foreigners in somebody else's land. And now because the king is an idiot and he threw himself a way larger party than he should have, probably made some decisions that he ought not have, now it's actually impacting us in our kind of peaceful little existence right now. And I'm sure they would have been asking the question like, God, are you here? Do you see us? Like we haven't been living wayward lives. We've been fairly obedient. We're not causing trouble. And I'm wondering, Lord, are you in this moment as now my beautiful niece is being ushered away to potentially become grafted into this kingdom of a very ruthless, very self-centered, probably very abusive king? I think it's probably fair to assess out of this story that there was a moment or two where both Esther and Mordecai, her uncle, would have been wondering where God was. And the storyline continues. We get a little bit more information. We find out that Esther, through several months, is like making her way through all of these rounds as King Xerxes is determining who his next queen is going to be. And as if you're wondering, like, my gosh, this is so barbaric. This is like, where are the women's rights here? You realize this is like the essential story of like the first Bachelor, right? Like this is, like they're choosing who's going to be the next rose recipient. She's going to get bejeweled up. And here's what happens in the story is Esther becomes the chosen queen of Persia. It shocks everybody because she's hiding her identity, and she becomes Xerxes. It says when he sees her, he's enamored to a degree that outweighs and outmeasures any of the other women that have been brought to the kingdom. And so Esther now is appointed queen of Persia. She goes from being this exiled young lady to now being the queen of Persia. But it's not all the perks you imagine it to be. If you are the queen to Xerxes, you're not just like the only woman that he sees. He's got like a plethora of harem. He's got like hundreds of other women that he's enslaved and like brought to the palace. So although she's queen, she might not see him for time, like months at a time. She's like the March Thursday on his schedule, in essence, right? It's really brutal. And so Esther, although she's called queen, it's still a really it's an undetermined future. Yes, she's in the palace. Yes, she's protected by way of affiliation to Xerxes. Yes, she's over all of the Persian Empire by way of being chosen, but she's no longer with her family. Her family actually has no access to her. Mordecai and her, by their connection, she has to walk the grounds in her free time. And what she does is she walks along the hedges of the palace. And Mordecai, every day, the Bible says that her uncle would meet her out on the court like hedges. And he would ask her every day, are you okay? Do you realize that God is still with you? Are you hopeful? Are you being treated okay? But Mordecai isn't allowed into the palace. He can only speak to her through the hedges. Now, there's something really interesting because Mordecai, even though he's not given access to see Esther anymore, in their through the hedges conversations actually has this really interesting occurrence where he hears two officials from Xerxes, staff of Xerxes, plotting to kill the king. He overhears it, and what he does, Mordecai comes to the hedges and he tells Esther, hey, Xerxes' staff is actually plotting to kill Xerxes. And I think it would be wise for you to go tell the king that somebody's plotting to overthrow the kingdom. And so Esther hears this from Mordecai, takes the information to Xerxes, and Xerxes is like, he's thankful, he takes swift action, he kills, he has those people executed, and Esther is seen as like somebody who cares for and defends the king. She brings the attention back to Mordecai. She's like, it's not me, it was Mordecai. But King Xerxes looks over it. He doesn't give any sort of blessing or gift for saving the king. And Mordecai, I think probably in that moment is like, yo, I saved your life, Xerxes. Like, you get to oil up and go for another, like, suntan out on your patio. Anything coming my way? Is there anything that you'd like to bestow to me? You already have my niece. Would you like to maybe, I don't know, give me like an ADU, like a little, like, slice of heaven on the backside of the kingdom? And Xerxes is indifferent. He does nothing for Mordecai. And Mordecai probably is asking that same question again, like, man, I gave you something fantastic, aka another day of life. I helped you not get killed. And although maybe I didn't get something from you, Xerxes, God, like, were you ever going to make good on the fact that I just did something? I had like a huge solid for this guy. And if there was an economy of like do good and get good, Mordecai would probably be in a position where he's like, Lord, I'm waiting. I did some great stuff right now. And I'm just wondering if you're going to actually do some great stuff for me. I'm wondering if you're present, if you saw what I did there. And Mordecai doesn't receive a blessing in the exchange for giving that good fortune to King Xerxes. The storyline continues, and we meet this other character. His name is Haman or Haman. And as the story of Esther unfolds, we learn that Haman is essentially a rising official in the Persian Empire. He's not yet in the king's palace, but he's quickly becoming more and more authoritative. He's a ruthless warrior. He comes from tons of money, and he's trying to get close to the king because he wants to be hailed and loved and shrouded with all of the same attention. And Haman eventually rises to power, and he becomes within like the top 2 or 3 most powerful individuals in Xerxes' kingdom in the palace. And Haman is such a ruthless warrior that every time he enters the king's palace, when they make their way through town, Haman makes a law that when he crosses your path, your job has to be to stand up no matter what you're doing. You could be shopping at the farmer's market, you could be enjoying a coffee with your girlfriend, but when Haman walks by, your job is to put everything down, turn, stand, and bow as Haman walks by you. Super self-centered. If you have a boyfriend like this, you need to dump him, right? Haman is so full of himself, he requires, and he is violently reactive to anybody who doesn't do this. And Haman, choosing to make everybody bow, gets real furious when one person amongst all of them chooses not to bow. Do you know who the person who doesn't bow is? It's Mordecai. Mordecai in this story, everybody's bowing. Mordecai's like, not today, bro. That's Mordecai's response. He's like, I ain't bound to you. And we actually figure out that Haman's history, he has a nationality that for 1,000 years has been in opposition to the Jewish people. They are like venomous enemies. They have been warring against one another. There's no way they would sit in the same room together. So you actually know that Mordecai isn't not bowing because he loves God. He's like, I don't bow to you. I bow to the one true God. It's not like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Mordecai's like, I hate you, bro. I ain't bowing to you, right? It's just personal vendetta. I love it. So Haman coming in and out of the palace, trying to show his authority and his like just the supremacy of him as a person, gets so infuriated at Mordecai that Mordecai won't bow, that he makes this decree. He gets good with King Xerxes and he says, hey, Xerxes, there's a guy out there that isn't bowing when I walk by, pissing me off. And here's the deal. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd actually like to suggest that we, in order to get this guy to really bow, I want him to bow like 6 feet under in the grave. I want to make a decree that we could essentially wipe out all of the Jews that are in our Persian Empire, because Mordecai is a Jew. So if we can wipe out all the Jews, that would kill Mordecai. That would let me walk into the kingdom with everybody bowed, so this one dumb dude wouldn't be standing anymore. That's how infuriated Haman is about one guy not bowing to him. Xerxes is in the middle of another like ultra keg fest, and he's not in his right mind. He's super belligerent, and Xerxes, with much indifference, goes like, yeah, sure. Go for it. Wipe out all the Jews. If that one guy's giving you problems, just take the whole people group out. I'm over it. I'm actually like mid-keg over here, and I'd rather you not be like killing my buzz, right? That's essentially what Xerxes is getting, is like, that's the level of his interest. He's not like, well, what did he do? And why, have you been 1,000 years, generations, like at each other's necks? Oh, like Xerxes isn't interested in any of that. He just wants to keep the party going. Haman, like a snake, brings that like request in at like the time, like when your kids ask you something that's like very important to them, but it's not the time to ask, and you're like, yeah. And then all of a sudden your kid's like driving away in the car. Like, that's what Haman does to Xerxes. So Haman decides that there's going to be a decree. He's going to use the authority of Xerxes, and what he's going to do is he's going to say, there is going to be in 11 months, it's an interesting part of the story, but he rolls this dice. He rolls a die, and it gives you a number, and he chooses off the number rolled. It's not the game of craps, but he chooses off the number rolled the timeline that he's going to give Jews the opportunity to either flee, which he wants Haman, or he wants Mordecai to do, get the heck out of town, or be subject to the consequences. So he rolls this dice. It comes up with the number 11. So Haman says, in 11 months, all the Jews that are living in our province are going to be given, everybody else in our Persian Empire is going to be given permission to kill and plunder any of the possessions of any of the Jews. It's genocide in the worst way. And it's premeditated, which is crazy. So it's not like this slow boil. It's planned, it's written, and then Haman actually sends out messengers to all of the communities that are within the Persian Empire. And so now if you're a Jew, you're looking at billboards as you're driving your kids to school, and it's like, hey, in September, you can just murder any Jew you know, and you can have their house, you can have their car, you can have their boat, take their RV, you can have anything that's in their house, you can have whatever you want. And so now all of a sudden you can't fathom the kind of fear and stress that is starting to come over the Jewish community, these micro group of exiles in this Persian community. If you were a Jewish person, my gut tells me you'd probably be asking the question, God, do you see what's happening right now? I don't even have anything to do with this. This is between one very corrupt individual who is so consumed by one person bowing to him that now the implication is that me and my family are going to essentially be wiped out. We're going to be given permission to just be taken out. It's a timetable on my well-being. I'm sure there were families that when they went to bed, the kids would ask, hey, I read at school they made an announcement that all the Jews could be killed. Is that us, Mom? Is that us? Why are we living here if that's going to be the case? Does God who we pray to, a God who we say saved all of our ancestors, our grandma and our grandpa, God who split the seas and who saved our people, is it the same God? Is he going to come and save us? I can't fathom the kind of conversations that families would be having counting down this 11-month sentence. I'm certain they'd be asking the question, God, do you hear us? God, do you see us? God, do you care? The storyline continues. Haman is getting what he wants. And what's interesting about a king's decree is that once it's written, once it's the ring of the king is sealed on this decree in Persian law. Once it's put into play, not even the king can reverse it. The king can't take it away. Once it's in motion, it's in motion. And so it's this deep, stressful, like there's no way we're going to be able to find an out to this. And so Mordecai starts to communicate with Esther, especially once Mordecai finds out that Haman, who hates him tremendously, is actually plotting on the 11th month. Haman is so focused on his hatred for Mordecai that he builds a 75-foot stake in his front yard because his premeditated plan is he's going to take Mordecai and he's going to skewer him like a freaking shish kebab on that stake in his front yard. He's taken the time to fashion this super fancy kebab in his front yard. He has all these servants building in his front yard a 75-foot post. And the story tells us that his plan is to kill Mordecai on the day that 11th month comes. So the plot continues. Mordecai tells Esther before, hey, these people are going to kill Xerxes. Go tell Xerxes. Xerxes does nothing for Mordecai. Esther remains queen. It's business as usual. Esther, being in the kingdom, is not aware of all the chaos that's happening out here. And Haman's plot to kill the Jews is now put into motion in a way that nobody can reverse, not even the king. The story continues that Mordecai and Esther create a plan. They need to figure out a way that they're going to find an out, an exit. And Esther's the queen. She's the queen of Persia. She is the number one player in this whole kingdom. And so Mordecai and Esther come up with a plan, and their plan is this. They're gonna make a meeting with Xerxes. She's gonna plan a banquet because Xerxes loves to party. So she's like, I'll build a party and I'll get the piñatas, and Xerxes will be like, what, piñatas? And then he'll come, and then here's what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually invite Haman to the party, and we're going to reveal to Xerxes how ruthless Haman is. And remember that Esther has been concealing her identity this whole time because in the beginning, by happenstance, Mordecai says, don't tell anybody your nationality. But now this law is going to make it so that even Esther is going to lose her life if the 11-month decree comes to fruition. Even Esther, the queen, will be killed. And that's actually where we find this interesting verse, because in their plan, if you've ever been around church, you hear this verse and this phrase that people throw around, for such a time as this. It actually comes out of the Book of Esther. I'm going to read it to you because the plan that Mordecai and Esther come up with it's spelled out in verse 13 through 17. It says this: Then Mordecai sent back word to Esther, just because you live in the king's palace, don't think that out of all the Jewish people, you alone will escape. If you keep quiet at this time, somebody else will help and save the Jewish people, but you and your father's family will all die. Esther, being the only person, she's the linear peg for her family line. Mordecai is saying, don't think that because you're the queen, you're going to be exempt from this decree. So here's what I believe. Mordecai, a man of great faith, says, I believe even if you remain silent, God will show up. He will do something. But, what if, and it says, and who knows, you may have been chosen queen for such a time as this. You may have been chosen queen for just such a time as this. I love it because Mordecai's faith, and as the wise, what I'm assuming is uncle, I don't know if you have wise uncles in your lives or people who are just the spiritual wisdom in your world. I imagine Mordecai going like, Esther, it's been a hard run. I know you are not with your family. I know you're living super posh up in that kingdom, but here's the deal. Not even your status in this moment is going to save you from what man is trying to do. But what if God puts you in this place for this exact moment? I wonder if Esther actually even considered that she would be a pivotal person in the future saving of all of these people. And I love that the wisdom and the encouragement of Mordecai comes in. He's like, who knows? You may have been chosen queen for just such a time as this. So it says this, then Esther sent this answer back to Mordecai. Go and tell all the Jewish people in Susa together, for my sake, fast. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night and day, and I and my servant girls will also fast. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I die, I die. So Mordecai went away and did everything Esther had told him to. The reason why Esther says it's illegal is because in Xerxes' world, if you are uninvited, if you don't go to the palace by invitation, even the queen, if she just shows up and is like, hey, Xerxes, I was thinking about getting in and out. Do you guys want any? Like, if she did that, the law was written that she would be put to death. That nobody could enter into Xerxes' presence without an invitation. If you did, it was punishable by death. The only way that you would avoid death by unannounced entry into the king's palace is if he saw you, and mind you, it's not like a small room like this where I'm like, oh, hey, Kelly, what do you need? It's not like that. It would have been this giant grand palace. You would have needed to know who was coming through. So as you come closer, your fate is in or not in your favor. So you're praying, God, please, please, please let Xerxes invite me in. God, please, 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 please don't let him have one of the 100 people that are between him and I just like blow a dart, hit me in the neck and die, right? That's what you're praying, that you don't get killed on your unannounced entry to Xerxes' presence. And what Xerxes has to do, he has a golden scepter. He has to raise his golden scepter as a way of saying, I don't want that person to die today. And so Esther knows that this is her life on the line, but her uncle, Mordecai, is like, could it be that in this moment, God has you in this place for this very reason? She gets filled with this boldness, kind of boldness that I want to have in my own life. She gets filled with this boldness. She goes, if I die, I die. It's like a movie, right? She's like, let's go, right? Her face is probably painted half blue, right? She's like on a horse. If I die, I die. She goes in. Xerxes sees her, hasn't seen her in a long time, enamored again, raises his scepter. What do you want? What could I do for you, he asks. He's on bended knee, essentially. He actually offers her in this part of the story. He says, take up to half the kingdom. Like this guy is like whipped for sure, right? He's like, have half. I have it all. I don't care. I just want you. I love you. You're so beautiful. I don't know why, but I'm all about you. He offers half the kingdom, and you'd think that Esther would be like, I'll take half, babe, and then why don't you just give me all the Jews? She can't take the Jews because the law is already put into motion. So what she says is, here's what I want. Tomorrow, I want to have a special party, just you, me, and Haman. And here's what I want to do. You, me, and Haman, I want to suggest the thing that I want at tomorrow's party. And so Xerxes is like, yeah, babe, you got it. I'll see you tomorrow. Haman thinks that he's in. He's like, bro, I just got invited, like upper crust, VIP. I'm flying first class. I get to be with the king and the queen. He thinks he's getting the ultimate promotion. That night, Xerxes goes to sleep. Haman goes to sleep. Esther goes to sleep. The major deal is happening the next day. The Bible says that Xerxes cannot sleep that night. God's given him like some godly insomnia, right? He's like, you ain't sleeping tonight, baby. That's what God is doing. And Xerxes, in the middle of the night, asks one of his servants, go get the Chronicles of Persia, because I want you to read to me. The Chronicles of Persia are basically a history log of all the things that Xerxes has done that's worth talking about. So Xerxes, in the middle of the night, insomnia, is like, hey, go get that book that talks about me and all the things that I did, because I want to hear about me and all the things that I did. So self-centered. And so the scribe is reading the first story he reads. Guess what story he reads? He reads the story of how Mordecai saves him from assassination. And he's like in the middle of the night, what the heck? What did we do for Mordecai? And the scribe is like, you didn't do jack for Mordecai. And so he's like, we're going to do something for Mordecai. So the next day, Haman comes in and he's like, man, I can't wait for tonight's party. And he's like, hey, Xerxes says, hey, Mordecai, or hey, Haman, what would you do for somebody who like did this tremendously valor act on behalf of the king, potentially saved his life? Like, what would you do for that person? Haman, thinking it's about him, is like, I would get the king's robe, I would give him a king's horse, I would make a parade for him, I would do all of those things. And so the king is like, cool, I hear you, let's go do that for Mordecai. And Haman is burnt to a crisp in his soul because Xerxes is telling Haman, actually, we're going to do all of those things, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to be the guy that's holding the horse, walking Mordecai around the palace, and everybody can celebrate how awesome he is. The story is fully flipped. Haman has all the power. He's able to do wicked things, and God in his providence and his grace is taking this humble man who's doing right by his own ability, and God is giving him a shot at at having an opportunity to be seen and heard and loved and known. It burns up Haman, and I have to get through this. It's such a fun story to tell. That night, Esther and Haman and Xerxes are together. And Esther says, Xerxes, I have to tell you about this wicked person. He's actually committed that all of my people be killed. And I'm actually one of those people. I'm a Jew. It's the first time she reveals who she is. And Xerxes is so thrown by this. He's like, who in the world would allow such a thing? And she's like, well, when you were like neck deep in beers, you actually allowed it with Haman. And Haman's like, oh, dang. And so Haman, not getting what he wants, is actually the Bible kind of it shows a picture of him like not physically attacking Esther, but there's an altercation where they touch, and Xerxes thinks that Haman is attacking Esther. And he's like, you want to kill all of Esther's people? Now you're trying to be all up on my girl in my own house. And so he immediately calls for Haman to be executed. And then all of the guards are like, hey, there's this sweet 75-foot pole at Haman's house. And then Xerxes is like, put it to use. And Haman gets hung on his own post that was meant for Mordecai. The storyline goes that actually Mordecai gets promoted through all of it, and he actually gets Haman's position. Eventually, through the story, he gets Haman's house, and then he gets all of this bestowed blessing in God's timing. Such an interesting story. So here's what I want to tell you. I got to burn this down in 1 minute, okay? You may be asking the question through this storyline, are there things in my life that God is in motion with but has not yet revealed himself completely in? I might be feeling unseen, unheard, unjustifiably represented, and I'm telling you through the story of Esther, God reveals himself in very unique, very uncharacteristic ways. But here's what I will tell you. The personal application in this is that God's silence is not or ever God's absence. God's silence is not God's absence. Through all of this, you do not hear the person or the name or the word of God until they start to fast and they start to pray that God's mighty hand move in a way that no man's hand could move. And in this, God's word, God's voice, God's hand, God's motion, God's power is put on display. So here's what I'm going to tell you. God's silence is not absence. In Romans 8:28, it says, we are confident that God is able to orchestrate everything to work towards something good and beautiful when we love him and accept his invitation to live according to his plan. We are confident that God is able to orchestrate those things. Maybe you're in a position this morning where you're not quite confident that God is orchestrating something great because it's just been such a long time since you felt like you've seen his good work at hand. I'm telling you, through the book of Esther, man, God's timing is always perfect. It might not feel perfect for you, but it is his perfect timing. The second thing is that God's silence is not indifference. God's silence is not indifference. His inactivity or his seeming inactivity in your life is not his apathy. He is not underwhelmed by you. He is not over you. He is not bored with you. He is working your life into his greater story of his goodness and his redemption and his grace. And it requires from you and I great trust, like Nico in the middle of the night, that I did not abandon him. You can get close to Jesus. You can get as close to God as you want. You can get on his pillow and be like, God, please show me that you're still here. We do that through examining his character here. He shows you that he's close here. He reminds you of his goodness here. Through the person of Jesus, you get the character and the goodness of God. God's silence is not God's indifference. Lamentations 3 says, certainly the faithful love of the Lord hasn't ended. Certainly God's compassion isn't through. They are renewed every Sunday when you come to church. It doesn't say that. It says they're renewed every morning. That's how good God is. It doesn't matter what you do. God's character in nature is that he is innately good. His compassion isn't through. It is renewed every morning. Great is your faithfulness, Lamentation tells us. And then lastly, God's work happens. God works in both the extraordinary things in life and absolutely in the ordinary things in life. You might be like, Mingo, I'm never going to be queen of Persia. I can't even get like a call back from the job I'm trying to get. You might see yourself as extremely ordinary, and here's what I'm telling you. God works fantastically through the ordinary. God takes ordinary things and he graces them with his supernatural presence. You might have an extraordinary challenge in front of you. You might think that you're sitting in something that is irreparable by mankind. You might think that the decisions that have been made around you, to you, for you, or by you are no way, shape, or form ever going to find the kind of levity that you hope for in one season of your life. I'm telling you this, no matter how extraordinary the pain or how extraordinary the trial is in your life, God can still work in ways that will shock the people that are around you. Most importantly, shock you. So here's the question. If you're asking, God, are you here? That you would give him the time, you would give him the appropriate space in your world to let him answer that question through the testimony of other people that God has put in proximity to you and through the good word that he shows us in the Bible, specifically this week, Esther. We're going to get through the second part of Esther, but here's what I want to do. I want to close with a song. We started it last week. We introduced it last week. I want it to be a prayer over you, and I want you to think through the lyrics of this song and sit there, and then maybe through the middle of the song, you transition to putting your hands out or closing your eyes or just thanking God for how good he is, even if we don't see him clearly yet. I love what Rick Warren said many times while together. He said, our vision when it comes to God is like a Polaroid picture. The more time you give it, the clearer God's fingerprints are. Right? Vision is like a Polaroid. Like the longer you give it time, the clearer it is to see God's hand at work. So here's the question. Can you give God the time that he needs to reveal himself the way that you're praying? That's what I want to know. We'll get through the rest of Esther in the weeks to come, but I'm excited that we're in this book. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you for the character and the person of Esther. Thank you for her strength as a woman. Thank you for her faith. Thank you for Mordecai, a loving uncle. Thank you for your justice, and thank you for your goodness through this narrative that we went through today. Lord, show us that you are the same. Remind us that you have not changed. If we feel outskirted, or if we feel marginalized, if we feel like we have been left on the back burner, Lord, would you remind us that you are good, that you never forget those who you've chosen and you have called. We love you, Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen. Would you guys join us for this last song?